You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about cameras, but not your usual run-of-the-megapixel cameras. We're going to be talking about homebrewed cameras designed and produced by people who truly love the art and craft of picture taking. Joining us will be 4 engineers, makers, tinkerers, call them what you want. These are people who build fully functioning cameras with style, creativity, and the do-it-yourself spirit that makes their creations so interesting. We're going to be speaking with Sam Cornwell of Solarcan, Steve Lloyd of Chroma Cameras, both from the UK, and after a break, we're going to welcome Filippo Nicino of I'm Back, a Swiss company that produces digital backs for 35mm film cameras. And finally, we're going to speak with Ethan Moses of Camera Dactyle, a New Mexico-based creator who utilizes 3D printing to make wonderfully colorful view cameras. Okay, let's get started. Sam Cornwell is the kind of guy who can show you a soda can, convince you it's a camera designed for photographing sun trails, and actually sell you one. He's the inventor of Solarcan, which are 12-ounce cans turned into precision pinhole cameras designed for capturing the arc of the sun as it traverses the sky over the course of hours, days, or weeks. Welcome, Sam.
Hi, how are you doing?
We're doing swell. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, you just said 12 ounce. I've never heard it said as 12 ounce before, because over here in Europe we say 440 mil. So I wonder if that's the same.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? We're going to do some research just to clarify. But yeah, I think it's essentially the same form factor and weight as a soda can. Am I correct about that?
That's correct. So the body is an aluminium can.
So how did you fall into this? What gave you the idea to do this? Is it safe to assume you were doing pinhole photography and just one day something crossed your mind? Or give us the story on this. What's the backstory?
Well, it was Christmas 2016, I think. Yep. And it was something I've been wanting to do for a while, create some pinhole cameras from recycled materials, etc., and record the sun's trail using solargraphy method. And so what I did was I created a bunch, and I thought, as it's Christmas, I could give these away to friends, and they were a hit. People loved them. But the problem was I couldn't sell them on Etsy, because I tried selling them on Etsy, like old Foster. You have Fosters over there, or Budweiser, or something like that. I tried making them handmade ones with gaffer tape and cardboard and what have you, and putting them for sale on online sites, etc. And there were no takers. And not to want to be proven wrong, I decided to set my goal of creating a commercial version, one that looked beautiful, that people would want. And that is the short and the long of it. How Solarcan came around 4 months after that.
So was it that aesthetically it just wasn't appealing, your original camera? What made people not buy? Do you have any idea?
Well, you couldn't use the logos, right?
Yeah, well, you could seal it up so you could change it so you can see that sort of thing, covered with gaffer tape and that sort of thing. But it just didn't look right. There was something not nice about it. I knew that no one had ever done this commercially, or there wasn't something existing in the market. So I got to work, and I thought to myself at the start of January 2017, I'm going to put aside £100. That's about $120 in your speak, and a week to prototype a first version. And in fact, it took 4 months and about £5,000 to prototype the first version, because I had to do. There was such a huge learning curve, and there were so many things that I hadn't thought about when I was making it, which came to fruition afterwards.
So, is this a stock? I know I don't want to use the word soda can, or is this something that was specifically built that just looks remarkably like a soda can at the end of the day? I mean, how did you arrive to this particular item? Yeah, how do you source them?
Okay, so the idea of beer can solargraphy camera has been around for many, many years. So it's a fun workshop thing. So people make these things out of recycled materials, etc. So the idea for what I wanted to do was head up to the manufacturer of aluminium or aluminum cans and purchase a bulk load of them, and therein lies the first problem. You can't just purchase a few to make your prototype. I had to purchase a pallet of 3,500 just to get started. And that was my first venture into it.
And are they blank at that point, or do they have?
Yeah, completely blank. We call them virgin. We call them virgin Solarcan. So they've got absolutely nothing on them. They're completely clear. Obviously, nothing inside them. There's no lid on them. They're just ready for fabrication. At that point, whereas usually people would put drink, etc., into them, but instead we use that model, we use that unit, and turn that into a camera.
Pretty good idea.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how it works inside. I mean, I know it's a pinhole camera, but
I mean, because you're also saying this is very specifically for one type of an application is what you're stressing it for. So how does all that come about?
Well, that's right. My background is both photography and astronomy. So I've worked as an astronomer for many years and a photographer too. And this neatly puts both those things into one neat little package and keeps my attention, certainly, because it's a camera that takes an astronomy-based photo, so a photograph of the sun. The sun is our closest star, and it takes the movements of that sun over through seasons, months, etc., days, weeks, months, or years, we tell people. So what Solarcan is basically is a 440mm aluminium can, and it's been designed to be a camera. So inside there's photographic paper. Externally, there's beautiful design around the outside of it, including the logo, the instructions, what it is, etc. And there's a pinhole, which in effect acts as your lens. It's sealed on top, so it's waterproof apart from the pinhole, but we could talk about that later. And it comes with a lovely manual and etc. instructions for when you want to install it and shoot it somewhere.
One question is the pinhole on the side of the can or one of the ends? Where is the pinhole located?
If you have a look at the design of the Solarcan, you'll see the word Solarcan, and on the right-hand side, you'll see our logo, which looks a bit like what the result you'll get after a few months. Now, in between that, there's a small thing called a black tab. Underneath that black tab, which you peel back when you're ready to activate your Solarcan, is the pinhole.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah. So when you activate the Solarcan, when you peel that black tab back off, the sunlight, which is incredibly bright, pierces through that tiny, tiny hole there, 0.4mm hole, and starts affecting the photographic paper that's inside. The exciting thing about this, which I'm sure we'll come to as well, no chemicals are needed to develop it.
How about, curious about the hole. I mean, it has to be very specific in its size, and aluminum doesn't always... the hole could grow.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question as well, because when we started, we had problems controlling that size of the hole, but we worked through the problems and did some engineering, and we discovered that with the right drill bit and a high-speed pillar drill, we were able to get over that process to keep the deburring to a very minimum and keep that hole constant in size.
What is the actual pinhole material made as? Is it a sheet of brass, or is that also aluminum? And is it separate from the can, or do you actually machine the pinholes and then put them onto, attach them to the can, say over a larger hole that was cut or something? I mean, how do you do that?
We're taking the idea of a camera right back to its very, very basics. There's no particular lens on this. The lens is basically the aluminium drilled. That is it. There's no extra unit on top of that. So we're drilling onto the aluminium that's there. The Solarcan is the lenses itself, and it's the camera itself, and the photographic paper lines the inside of the wall of that Solarcan.
And what opens to get the paper in? Do you pull off the whole top?
Oh, well, because we build it, we manufacture it, fabricate it here in the Scottish borders. We put it in before the top gets closed.
Oh, okay.
So we close it.
And then
we have a special method.
And so how do you get it out to process it then?
Oh, this is fun. So you use a normal baked bean tin can opener. So a baked bean tin opener. Do you know what one of them is? I'm sure you have them.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, one of them. Yeah. So you pop it on the top and you wind it round, and it cuts a line around the top very, very smoothly, doesn't create any sharp edges or whatnot. And the top of the lid just pops in, and you're able to pull that photographic paper out.
So it's a one-shot camera.
Well, you say that. So there's several different ways I respond to that. Is a drink, a one-time use drink. But what we've got this huge community here where what they do is they're reusing it. So they're making their own lids and putting a lid back on.
Right.
But the idea of what Solarcan is, it's more than just a camera. It's a whole experience.
Right.
So people who are not used to this form of photography are going to learn something. When they open it up, they reveal the photographic paper that's inside and suddenly have this sort of light bulb moment of, oh, that's how it works. I can start making these my own, or I could pop another lid on this and see if I can make it work again. Or if they're really lazy, they can just buy another one.
and the issue of putting another lid on is just to basically keep the light out, right? I mean, that's the only problem, right? So if you gaffer tape it should be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it won't look so nice, but it'll work.
No, of course not.
How do you recommend anchoring? Because if you're going to be doing an exposure for a few hours, days, or weeks, or whatever, and you basically using it's an empty can, and it doesn't take much to blow them over.
Well, with every single Solarcan that you purchase, it comes in a cardboard tube, lovely cardboard tube, and inside that is your Solarcan. But in the lid of that, there's two 500 millimeter cable ties. That's very long. What's that? 500 millimeter, a couple of feet, or just a bit less than a couple of feet.
Yeah. Okay.
Cable ties to tie it to drain posts, lamp posts, your fence gate, a tree in your garden, or something like that.
I thought you were going to say inside the box are two 10-pound lead weights that
and a tripod.
No, cable ties or zip ties, I think you call them.
Okay, sure. And so, once you've kind of done it a few times and you've mastered the basics, how do you experiment and what can you do other than, juggling the time of your exposures to get creative?
So in the box, the lovely gift pack, we give away your handy Solarcan instruction booklet, which we update every 6 months with images from the community. So that gives you some inspiration. But on the back page, we've got tips and tricks, which we rate from easy, moderate to expert. And it tells you exactly what you're asking for there. So how do you experiment a bit further? There's several ideas on here. I don't want to give them all away, but one person put one in a car and drove about with it in the car. So rather than leaving it in a definite fixed position, it was inside a car. So the inside of the car details are there, but the sun's movement is incredible all over it. Or someone put one sideways, and by putting it sideways, you get a completely different path of the sun's rays. You'll have to see inside the manual, which you can download the website if you want to see it briefly.
We'll give that information at the end for sure.
Yeah, and one my number one recommendation is to use reflections. So if you're in front of a big river or reflective tower block or a skylight or something like that, that could always work very well, because something that's reflecting the sunlight can be just as powerful as the sunlight.
Well, where B&H is located, we're at the very edge of what's called Hudson Yards, which is a whole new development on the west side of Manhattan, and it's all curved shaped mirrored towers. And early morning, especially in late afternoon, the light beams bouncing around this neighborhood are pretty intense. That's probably a good application. One question I have: you say that there's no chemistry needed. You pull it out and it's already processed. This is a printing out paper that you're using. Is that correct?
No, it's darkroom paper. It is darkroom paper.
So it has to be processed then. You need some chemistry, right? Or no?
Absolutely not. No chemistry at all. What? I don't understand.
How did you know I was just about to say that? How do you know? Seriously,
I know. It's fun. You cannot get more simple than what it is.
I've worked in a dark room, and you need chemistry to get it. Otherwise, it just turns kind of grayish or something like that.
Exactly. And that's the point you're looking for. So if you take photographic darkroom paper out into the light, what happens to it? It changes color. Yeah. It goes a shade of maybe red or pink or magenta, depending
on the paper. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But that's what we're going to work with. We're going to control that discoloration. And the discoloration could be controlled if you have a pinhole to pierce that light to burn the line across the photographic paper. So if you have a look at some of the examples of the paper that you take out pre-inversion, which we can talk about as well, you'll see they're this sort of pinky magenta kind of color. and then you invert it using a scanner or your mobile phone or digital camera, and that's when the magic happens, when you get these beautiful images that you've seen online.
Okay. Now, how do you fix the images? Because if again, you take it out, it's being hit by more light now. So how do you fix the image and preserve it at this point?
Well, the fixing is done digitally. So you take a photo with your iPhone, or you do a scanner, and that's your fix. And what I say to people is just pop it away back into the side of the Solarcan, or put it in an envelope and leave it if you want to use it again later. But for all intents and purposes, that piece of paper is done there. That's where you finish with that. Now, a lot of people have said, but what if I want to chemically fix it? Now this is interesting. So for your really creative darkroomy experts that you've got listening to the show, nobody's ever been able to figure it out. No one's been able to fix or develop or fix a solar graph before. So this is something that hasn't happened before. So maybe if someone can figure that out, please drop us a line so we can share it with the community. But otherwise, we do it digitally.
How big is the piece of paper?
It's 5 by 7 inches.
Okay.
All right, so that's a good size then. All right. Yeah.
And you had mentioned that you wanted to get back to something regarding the waterproof nature of it, or the hole. And
I did mention that.
Yeah.
So I say it's waterproof, but how could it be waterproof if there's a tiny pinhole there? So in some very, very occasional circumstances, you can get something we call water ingress, where tiny, tiny drips of water get in because it's in a very, very exposed spot, or someone's tried to install one underwater. I don't know. But what's interesting is these images that come out, which are maybe 1 in 100, are people's favorite because they really create this crazy discoloration on the photographic paper. It's the imperfectness that people are looking for, the surprise they're looking for. And with water ingress, which is very difficult to achieve, that they can get that.
Now, have you had some customers or some early adapters who've come back to you with some really incredible images? Are there people that you would say that have taken it beyond just the experimental stage and are creating with it, or making art projects with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched as a Kickstarter in 2017, and within a few months, people were already showing me results. But some of these people have gone on to become, avid pinholers or avid solargraphy people or Solarcan people. And what I do is every 6 months, I refresh the instruction booklet and pop in images from the community. So none of those images are from me. They're images that people have sent in from all around the world that we've uploaded to the Instagram and whatnot. One guy in particular, a guy called James Lucas, I see his work come up a lot. He really experiments with his Solarcan. So he's got several, and he's taken the lids off them, so he's made new lids to put on them. He's added pinholes to some. He's put other stuff inside. Well, one interesting one he did very recently was he filled a Solarcan with marbles. And let it do its work, and it created this really crazy image inside, which is very beautiful.
That's great. No, that's what I'm talking about. That's great. Yeah.
Has anybody scanned them and actually reproduced them in very large formats? Because I'd imagine all of the little imperfections, because again, there's a limit to how much resolving power you get out of a paper negative and how much you could pull out of it. But I would imagine if you scanned it and took it up to like 60 inches across, they could be pretty powerful, strong images to watch.
Yeah, I've done some myself, and they are really, really lovely. So, but I generally tend to scan at 1200 DPI, so I can scale it up. But if I want to go 3600 DPI, I'm pretty sure my scanner can manage that, or I could send it out professionally to get done. But yet, there's the imperfections are what a lot of people strive for. So you get these beautiful. We've got all these different names. We've got sparkles. We've got things called snail trails, which we can explain in a different episode maybe. But all these different imperfections that you get on a Solarcan image. But I stress, if some people are confused listening to this, please go online and search for the images to make sense of what we're babbling on about here.
Yeah. Once you see it, it all makes sense. Also, it's interesting that they're all one-of-a-kind images. You can't make two the same. It's impossible.
Yeah, impossible.
Aside from the B&H website, where if people want to learn more about the Solarcans, where could they go?
Okay, well, we've got a website, which is solarcan.co.uk. Can't go wrong with that one. So we've got lots of videos, etc., and tutorials of how to use it, etc. And we've also got social media handles, of course, the Solarcan. So THE Solarcan for Instagram or Twitter and Facebook as well. But Instagram is probably the most image-rich one, as with most social media sites. And have a look on that, because all the images we upload are from the community. So you can see what other people are making and showing us, which is really heartwarming.
Sounds great.
Sam Cornwell, thank you so much for joining us again. It's Solarcans. We do sell them at B&H. They're a ton of fun and worth checking out. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sam.
Steve Lloyd likes large format cameras so much that he went out and designed one of his own. Chroma cameras are the first field cameras made of laser cut acrylic. Appropriately available in a choice of unconventional colors, chromas feature interchangeable film backs that attach to the camera using magnets, which makes it possible to quickly switch back and forth between 4x5-inch film to roll film backs. Lenses aren't included, but you do receive a 90mm f 225 pinhole lens board with each camera you purchase. Let's talk to Steve. So you're over in the UK, and you've been building this camera now for what, about 2 or 3 years now? This has been in the works.
Yeah, I did the first designs. About 2.5 years ago now.
Okay. Now, just to jump back a few more years, you're shooting for about, 12, 15 years. You are a working photographer, and you're also a tinkerer for a long time. You apparently used to do a lot of stuff with, like, remote control cars and exploding box cars, trains and stuff, things like that.
Yeah, I've always been making something with my brother and my dad.
Yeah, that's great.
So what got you into making your own cameras? That you couldn't find your own, or you just wanted the novelty of saying, I could do this better myself or more fun by myself?
I was kind of challenged into it in the pub, which is always dangerous.
A lot of great things start that way.
Well, I was on a film meet with a UK forum. We kind of go once a year, sort of for a week away somewhere, and go and shoot film and talk cameras. And I've always built one-off cameras and sort of customs and for other people, but I'd never designed a camera I could sort of mass produce as mass as one person can build. So we kind of got talking about the idea of it, and that's where Chroma came from.
So now this is an interesting camera. First of all, it's a technical field camera. Could you explain to our listeners who may not know the difference between a standard, say, a monorail and a field camera? You built a field camera. What's unique about it?
The biggest difference between a field and a monorail initially is really the weight. Monorail is literally based around a single solid rail, and your front and back standard slide along the rail. Mm-hmm. So when you pack it down, you're packing down a big rail, and it's inherently heavier. With a field camera, it folds down into itself by name. It was designed to be sort of carried into the field. It's much smaller, generally lighter, but it also retains all the same movements and the same or similar range of movements of rise, fall, tilt, shift, swing. So my Chroma kind of does a bit of everything.
So this camera is made out of acrylic, and you apparently did a lot of experimenting with this. Now, acrylic is an odd. It has its advantages because it's easy to work with, it's easy to mold, and you can make it in colors. But it also has other technical challenges because most cameras are made out of materials that are easy to machine to a precision finish. And when you're dealing with 4x5 or pretty much any camera, parallelism between, say, the front where the lens is and where the film plane is, where the digital sensor is, has to be really parallel. How did you get around? Did you have any problems as far as getting things to really line up properly?
All the cameras, they're all laser cut, the acrylic, so they're all repeatable. The laser kind of gets within about 1/10 of a millimeter of kind of the sizes that I design it in a 3D design program and then output the files for the laser. So it's repeatable. So the laser cuts all the parts the same. So you can maintain, like you say, parallel with the front and rear standard and with the bed. All the kind of the structural parts of the Chroma are laminated acrylic. So the bed is a laminate of 5 layers. So it's solid. It doesn't flex at all, but it also has a focusing bed, which is smooth. The uprights have stainless steel plates bonded to the acrylic to add more rigidity for the kind of structural parts. One limitation of acrylic on its own, which I think if people just pick up a piece of acrylic, they go, well, you can snap it in your hand, which you can. But if you cut it and laminate it so they're all bolted together and bonded, and then stainless plates, it makes the uprights really kind of strong and it doesn't go anywhere. I'm a bit fussy, so I didn't want a wobbly camera.
How many prototypes did you go through before you came up with the final camera? You said, this is all I'm going with.
I think I'm still going.
So are you still refining this? And that's not unusual, I think, for a lot of small production kind of items where you're constantly coming up with little variations of it that no two cameras may match exactly.
I am. I built, I think it was about 7 different versions down the line, all complete cameras, but with slight, like you say, revisions, different bolts, different structure slightly. But the kind of the camera followed the same theme. I had a rotating 3D printed hinge at one point for folding it down and all sorts of things. And then I started then looking at kind of volume costs. So making one camera, you go, okay, well, it's going to cost X amount, but if I'm going to build 150 of them, I've got to look at the costs to be realistic that also delivers an affordable camera, which was my main point. I'm not a rich photographer, so the idea of going and paying £1,000 for a camera, as nice as it would be, just wasn't feasible. So that my thinking was to keep the cost down as well, to make it appeal. And so many people who've bought chromas have never shot large format before. They've seen it as a way in. So, but yeah, I think I've probably got about 7 or 8 different versions in my workshop that have kind of come down the line and kind of been modified or written off entirely once I've built them. On screen, they might work. When you build it in real life, it doesn't always work that way.
I'd put them out on eBay as collectibles immediately if I were you, before they catch on.
I'll wait 20 years.
How many have you made so far?
What I've last counted, about 90.
90, wow.
Ah, okay.
Okay, and you do all the work yourself, or do you?
I do. It's all me.
Okay, that's incredible. Wow.
Now, one thing that's interesting is that the back of the camera is held on with magnets.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the rotating back has got 8 neodymium magnets embedded, sort of 4 in the back of the camera and 4 in the film back, if you like. It's a standard Graflock compatible back with a spring plate as well. So that's held on with these 4 magnets, which if you ever get to use one, keep your fingers out the way. They're very strong.
Because at first I said magnets. I don't know but obviously it is, and especially with the materials that you're using. I guess it all works really fine. And I think it's also worth mentioning that unlike Linhoff's, your camera is available in red, pink, blue, white, green, matte black, glossy black, purple, and yellow.
Yep. I just built myself a grey one.
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't in the campaign.
That's your stealth camera, right?
and
yeah, it blends in.
What would you say distinguishes yours, other than the colors and the acrylic from other cameras out there? I mean, what would be the main draw for somebody, especially if they're new to the system?
What does I say? Apart from the individuality, I'd say it's the affordability. Mm-hmm. I'm a massive fan of what Max has done at Intrepid in Brighton in the UK. They kind of the forerunners of Kickstarter. So obviously he set the bar with mainstream large format cameras. So I wanted to make it affordable, but also give you all of the range. So I've got rise and fall and tilt in the back standard as well as the front, which other cameras don't have. I've got swing and shift in the front as well. But it's just nice. It's quite tactile. I was at the photography show in the UK last weekend, where I spoke to a lot of people who've only ever seen the camera online or seen pictures of it. They've never held one. So the feedback was really great from people saying, it's really quite dense. So I wanted a solid but affordable camera that kind of gives you the range to learn on, really. You might never use all those movements, but they're all there if you want to try them.
But for those of you who are really truly interested in this, it's worth mentioning that the Chroma camera does accept lenses from 65 millimeter, which is pretty wide angle for 4x5, to 280 millimeters. So that's a good range of optics for a shooting with a 4x5. Any chance of putting a bag bellows on that if somebody wanted to go wider, or are you entertaining that thought?
To be honest with you, I've just cut the first test part, what we were talking earlier about constantly tinkering with the camera, for removable bellows. It's not something I've included with the original Kickstarter camera, just because added work involved really in the build. But it's something I may look to add as an option down the line. I say at the moment the bellows will go down to 65mm without a recessed board. Obviously, you can go further with a recessed board, but your movements are pretty limited. It's pretty much rise and a bit of tilt.
Yeah, true.
But if you wanted to, you could. I'm always modifying. My camera's now got a lead screw focus in bed rather than rack and pinion, so that's probably the next step.
Okay. And you're also doing a 6x12 roll film back. I saw,
yeah, I've got one on the sort of design table. I drew one up when I first did the campaign. I've printed a 6x12 body as well, with a view to kind of making a 4x5 back, along with an Instax wide back as well. But they're all kind of back burner while I'm building the cameras. Each camera takes probably 5 to 6 hours to build, so I've got a day job as well, so I've got to kind of focus on getting the cameras out and then do the accessories.
So you build each one to order?
At the moment I'm building each one to the Kickstarter rewards. So
okay, right.
Gotcha.
There were 150 cameras sold in the campaign.
Oh wow,
so,
that's
nice. That's good.
And are they do they tend to mostly be in the UK, or are they in the US too?
No,
Where
actually, the bulk are North America. I think there's been, I'd say probably about 70 or 80% of them were North America. And then I've just shipped one off to Hong Kong. Another one's going to Russia next week. A couple have gone to Australia. They're really kind of scattered after
that's
that.
Great.
So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
If our listeners are interested in the Chroma, which, by the way, costs approximately $350 here in the States, and it's really affordable if you want to get into large format shooting with something that is fun looking but is a real camera. It's not a toy. Anyway, if our listeners are interested in the Chroma, how could they get a hold of you? What should they be doing?
If you go to my website, which is just chroma.camera, you can contact me through that, or there are also links to my Instagram, Facebook page, and Flickr. So I'm always happy to speak to people if you want to ask me any questions about it. As I say, at the moment, they're not available for retail, but they will be later on this year once all the Kickstarter rewards are built.
There you go. By the way, it's Chroma. That's CHROMA. That is Chroma. That's how it is spelled. And it's great, and it looks like a lot of fun. And if you haven't seen this thing, definitely go online, take a look at it. It's a giggle, and it makes you want to go out and take pictures. And that's what it's all about.
Excellent. Yep, that was the idea.
Wonderful.
All right. That's terrific. Steve Lloyd, Chroma, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to speak to you.
Okay, we're going to take a short break and be back with Filippo Nishino of I'm Back and Ethan Moses from Camera Dactyl. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhoto Video, #BHPhoto Podcast.
All righty, we are back, and we are going to be talking with Filippo Nishino, who is the co-founder and business developer of I'm Back Pro Digital Backs, which was developed by Samuel Melo Medeiros, who's the CEO and creator of this little device. If you haven't seen this, here's the deal. If you have a camera, and as many cameras that do that, a film camera where you could take the back off, you could put this device on, the I'm Back Pro Digital Back, and it turns your camera into a digital camera. Now, it's really interesting. Any 35mm camera that you could take the back off, this is old Leicas and Nikons. I think you have backs for about 20 different cameras, if I'm not mistaken. And, well, I'll tell you what, rather than me just read off a bunch of specs, why don't you tell us about it?
Yes. Thank you very much to invite me today. You're right. We did develop different dedicated back covers for our clients. So that means I'm Back is a digital module that is retrofitted to the analog photo cameras. That means if you have a 35mm analog photo camera, you can adapt it with this digital module, which is hybrid. That means you can always go back to film cameras. And there is a universal adapter that helps you to adapt almost all 35 millimeter analog cameras. But in case we did also develop several 30, for instance, different dedicated back covers that have a better fitting, a hermetical closing to your analog camera. So you can choose between using the universal adapter, which is not closing hermetically the back of the analog camera, but it works very well. And we did also develop those 31 different dedicated back covers.
What would be the reason to buy the universal back if, unless you have such a very odd camera? Is that the only reason? Because you would want to get the one that's dedicated to fit, correct?
Well, unless my guess is if you have a short budget and you own 5 different kind of film cameras.
I guess so, yeah. If you want to use it on different cameras, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the universal adapter is already included in the box with the IMBAG. So that means if you buy the IMBAG, you have already a universal adapter inside and you don't need a dedicated cover. Okay. But, if you have an expensive analog camera or one that you really like if you have Leica or something special, you want to maybe get the best out of it, you should have the dedicated back cover because it fits perfectly onto your analog camera, and it's increasing your user experience. I think it's better, it's more hermetically, it fits better hermetically, the closeness very well, and the light is really do not penetrate with the dedicated back cover. I think the experience at the end of the day is much better. It works with the universal adapter, but we suggest strongly to have the dedicated adapter in case you see it on the list.
And what are the most common kind of cameras, that people request the dedicated backs for?
Oh, we had many requests for the Canon, for all Canons in general. Mm-hmm. The list that we've done for.
I actually have the list here. It might make it a little bit easier. First of all, the IMBAG Pro Digital Back. All of these items, by the way, are available at B&H. We're now a dealer of your products. Yeah. The basic unit itself, the IMBAG Pro Digital Back, is $299, and then for anywhere from $49 to $69, you can get backs. I'm just going to read off some. There's the Olympus OM1, OM2s, Canon F1, Nikon F, F2. All the Leica M's practically, all the Leica R's, Minolta XD, Nikon F3s, all the Nikons, Pentax K1000. How about a Contax G1 or G2? A lot of really, and also Diana F. So there's again, like you said, there's over 25 backs that we actually stock that you could use this for. Now it's interesting. Here's something I need a little of an explanation for, and anybody else is going to look at these specs will probably do the same thing. Now we're talking about a digital sensor. It's a 1.23-inch CMOS sensor. It's a tiny little 16-megapixel point-and-shoot sensor. Yet you're claiming no crop factor. How are you doing this?
Yeah, this is the really the point of our device, of our invention. So we have a focusing screen that in which the image is created. So from the focusing screen, we bring the image down to the smaller sensor, as you correctly said before. So this is exactly the point. We want to maintain the vintage flower of the pictures, this warm sensation of the pictures from an analog camera. So it's not a digital photo that you're getting with the IMBAG, but you'll take a photo which maintains the characteristics of the analog, and it is digital. So that's the cool and great thing. And through the focusing screen, we are able to avoid any crop factor. That means we get the entire picture that's formed on the surface of the focusing screen and bring it down with one mirror directly into the small sensor.
How long did it take you to figure this out and actually get it to work? Because this is not easy stuff you're talking here.
Yeah, I think the project, it was born through Samuel Melo Medeiros. He had a museum at home of analog photo cameras, and he always was thinking about how to revive or to give a second life to this wonderful mechanical devices, these analog photo cameras. And he started to gold plate them. because he thought, let me put a value on this, and he started to sell gold-plated analog photo cameras, and he had a few clients that were very surprised with that, and then he was thinking about how to make something out of this wonderful stock of analog cameras, and it was there that he had the idea to just make a digital bag for all those cameras, and one of the problems he wanted to solve is to have a multi-brand platform, a multi-brand device that could be fitted to all his analog cameras, and that's the reason why we came out of the solution with this kind of universal adapter, and then specific dedicated adapters to improve the user experience. But this was the entire idea, to have one device for all the analog cameras.
And when did you actually start, the development of it, the building of it?
So it was 5 years ago, approximately, that the first samples were created. That means in 2014, almost the first samples, the 3D printed prototypes were done, and then we improved it gradually during the years. But we had really an acceleration this year, 2018, in which we got the first functional prototype with the final design, with an industrialized design, let me say. And it was during September that we decided really to inject them in plastic, in plastic injection with an industrial optimized design. And 2018 was really important for us because we did accelerate through the Kickstarter campaign. So we launched it in May, and when we got the funding, we just started to industrialize the prototypes we did in the last 2 years, and here we are.
That's great. By the way, just a couple little technical points of the sensor, as I said, is a 16 megapixel, 1.23 inch CMOS sensor. The ISO range is 100 to 1600. It shoots JPEGs and RAW, and there's a 2-inch LCD touchscreen on the back. So it's pretty involved. It's a real camera.
And where do you get the sensors? Where do you buy the sensors? Where do you source them?
Okay, we source them in China, obviously, in the biggest playground for electronics, let me say. So it's in Shenzhen. We just selected. We selected one of the best chipsets. So that means we use a Novatec chipset, and we combined it with a very efficient sensor. So that's a Panasonic sensor, and based on these characteristics, we chose our supplier that. In Shenzhen, in this area, you find almost everything.
Right. I'm just curious, when you use the system with your analog camera, you have to shoot and then advance, like you would advance your film roll, or you can. You have both. So through the sync flash cable, we connect the analog camera to our motherboard, to the IMBAG device. So you have like this cable connected between the sync flash and the IMBAG. That means you can use the mechanical options. So you can wind the camera mechanically and shoot the picture. And the thing is that you need to leave your camera on B mode. That means when you when you press the mechanical button, you will leave the shutter open for 3 seconds, and then you get the picture, because it is aperture priority. That means first you focus your camera on the picture, you make it sharp, and then you wind your mechanical camera, take a picture, and leave it for
is 3 seconds almost open. That means you hear the beeps, 1, 2, and 3, and then you get a picture. But you make everything mechanical. You have also the option to press on the button on the red button that's behind the iron bag, instead of using the mechanical
And
shutter.
Setting up the camera and putting the back on your camera is a pretty easy process. Is there anything that like a non-engineer would need to know in order to do that?
Oh, it's very, very easy. What you need to do is just to take the rear cap out of your analog camera. It's like a small pine that you need to press sometimes, and the most complicated cases, it's a small screw that you need to take out. But it's not invasive. That means you can always put it back. And once you took out the rear bag, it is very easy. You just put either the universal adapter or the dedicated adapter, the dedicated cover, for instance, and you just fit your camera on it and screw it with the tripod screw on the bottom, and that's it. And then you slide it into the digital bag and clamp it, and you're ready to go. That's very easy.
What are the image being recorded onto? What kind of cards are you taking?
So your image, the iron bag has a micro SD on the bottom. A slot can just fit a micro SD in the bottom. And there is also an app. You can also use an app on your smartphone. There is an app that you can install on your smartphone and use your smartphone, for instance, as a live view, or you can store directly the pictures, the photos, and the videos on your smartphone, and then you can post them directly on social medias.
So this is pretty involved. Okay, this is interesting. That's really great. By the way, just as a point of information, I just got a green light to do a full test on the iMac Pro digital back for the B&H Explorer website, and I'm looking forward to it. I have a couple of Nikon Fs and a lot of lenses, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to be fun. No matter what, it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
It's really great.
So we can find them on the B&H site, and tell us, Filippo, where else can we find information on the iMac?
Okay, I'm back on our website, www.imbag.eu. So that's our official website. You have the several informations, and we are also on Instagram, on Facebook. And if you Google it, also you can find many blogs wrote about our device.
Filippo, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great talking about this digital back. I'm looking forward to playing with it, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be going online to taking a peek at this.
Yes, I'm very happy to be with you today. And I just wanted to anticipate we're working on the medium format. I'm back for medium format also.
Ooh, really?
Really. We have a first prototype, and hopefully we will be very soon back to you guys to launch it together and to show you also the medium format.
Hey, listen, just between you and me, no one's listening. Could you get me one of these? I really want to play with this. I'll do some experiment. Nobody else is listening. It's just us, okay? I won't tell anybody, I promise.
As soon as we have the final prototype, you will have one.
All right, okay. Filippo, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys.
All right. Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.
Ethan Moses is the creator of Camera Dactyl, a 3D printed view camera with an aesthetic that harks back to the Haight-Ashbury section of San Francisco in the late 1960s. Available in a dizzying selection of colors and patterns, your chances of getting hit by a low-flying aircraft are slim if you're standing next to one of Ethan's creations. Ethan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks very much for having me on.
We've been talking about this for a while, so I'm glad we were able to finally get this going. So I have to ask you, how long have you been involved with this Camera Dactyl? What planted the seed for this whole thing?
Oh, I mean, I guess the story probably goes back to when I was 13 or 14 and I bought my first camera at B&H. But more,
that's the secret of getting on the podcast, folks. Buy your first camera here and you got a seat. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
So about a year ago, I bought a 3D printer for the purpose of laser etching some PCBs for an electronics project I was doing. And took a long time for some chips to come in, and I had this 3D printer sitting on my desk. I have built cameras for myself and used cameras forever and ever, but I've never built any cameras to sell. I sort of just started tinkering with it and built myself a 4x5 view camera, or field camera, if you will. And I thought it was, pretty fun. And I threw it up on Kickstarter and quickly became a victim of my own very mild success.
Now, let me ask you, have you used field cameras prior to this? Was it something you were familiar with? And are you, obviously you take pictures, you're a serious photographer. Do you do this? Oh, okay. Now, is this a living that are you shooting for a living? Or is this just a really fun side thing for you?
Yeah, it's a really fun side thing. I originally went to college for physics and dropped out and thought I was going to be a photographer. The photos that I like to take have very little commercial value. I'm not super good at it, but I love it. I've been taking pictures and building, photo equipment since I was 13 or 14 years old.
But are you a builder? Are you a maker? What is your day job, if I can ask?
Sort of like your backyard engineer. I build industrial and fix industrial machinery for a living, conveyor systems for canning lines and that sort of thing.
But now, and I have to ask you a question. When you're designing conveyor systems for canning factories, are they in multicolors and pop art? I mean, because you seem to, you're. It's not just that you're making cameras; you're making fun cameras. They're whimsical. They're you cannot help but smile when you look at one of your cameras.
Thank you. So the funny thing about that is I am not a very good sort of like visual designer. I hope that some people would argue with me on that, but I'm really concerned with like making things that work. I like electronic and mechanical systems that do things well, and sort of the color or the look of the thing is very secondary to me. So if you're building like the other day, I made just sort of like a 3D printed switch holder for a sensor on a canning line, and it doesn't, like, nobody cares what color their industrial machinery is. They just care how many cans you can pump out in a minute, and how often it fails. And so, if pink is cheap that week, I'm printing in pink.
I love it.
Sort of carried it over to the camera Dactyl, but people really either loved or hated it, and no press is bad press for sure. And
no, it's true.
I dare somebody to say I hate a pink field camera.
It's
especially
like,
with what is it with unicorns on it? Come on. So where do you source the Bellows? Or
I build them.
You build them? Yeah.
Yeah, so the original Kickstarter, I sold 3 or 4 times the amount of cameras I originally thought I would, and it took me about a month to hand build all of those Bellows, and it just wound up being like really, really, really tough to put in that many hours to assemble those original cameras. So my later designs, I think instead of necessarily designing the camera that I want and then figuring out how to build it, I've been doing a lot more around figuring out what is a good camera that I can build a little bit more easily. And so I design print objects in AutoCAD now in a way such that they will print easily and not need a lot of support. And so I don't need to spend hours trimming parts with a knife or clippers. And I don't need to do things like fold and glue Bellows for a month straight.
How about tolerances? Because using materials that are most cameras are made out of aluminum, brass, and all kinds of things that are kind of stable and precision. You're dealing with materials that are much more less than precision, for lack of better words.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There are methods, though, by which you can achieve precision results without having to have precision parts. So, for example, in the first camera Dactyl, it has rack and pinion focusing rails on the front and back. And traditionally, like, I modeled it off of a Deerdorf I had. I really love those cameras. And, I would love to make cameras out of mahogany and brass, but, they would take me a month to make one, and I have to charge such a price that you'd be way better off going out and buying a Toyo or a Takahara or something like that. And so what I figured out is, the Deerdorf has a steel shaft with, brass pinions and brass or steel racks. And they just fit together absolutely perfectly.
I think it's also worth mentioning that you have something else in common with Deerdorf, and that is that Deerdorf, for those of you who don't, if not familiar, it's the premier view camera manufacturer. They're no longer in business, but what was really amazing about them, an American company, they made everything in-house, including the smallest screws, so that everything in that camera came from that factory. Nothing was sourced out. Everything was made specifically for that use. And you're doing the same thing with your cameras, in a sense, right?
Yeah, I'm trying. So there are some things that I'm now buying off the shelf in terms of hardware and screws. But so what I've figured out is that if my rack and pinion doesn't have the same sort of precision tolerance, what I can do is use some screw adjusters so that I can tension the rack against the pinion or vice versa, and achieve like something that is smooth, that has no wiggle. And so I always sort of use the quality of the material in my designs, right? So things have certain tolerances that can be adjusted often. This new Cameradactyl OG has a helical focusing ring, which I built it in such a way that it's very hard to do it in plastic and still have it move smoothly and have no wiggles. But, I added a couple metal screws and I split that part up into about 4 parts so that you can adjust the screw tension until everything is nice and snug. And so, it just requires a little bit more thinking about generally how you tension joints together. But, totally doable.
So let me ask you, would you consider actually taking what you've learned so far building these fun 3D printed cameras into something that is a higher level, more precise, and obviously going to be more expensive, but you have any thoughts in your head that, you know what, I got this thought in my head, I might just do this one of these days, and somebody's going to say I need it and I want it?
I'm not the hugest mass producer, but I would love to make things that are really reasonably priced, that people get good value out of, that sort of do the thing that they're supposed to, as well as you would think they would for what they cost. I try and bring products to the market that I think I can do so in a way that is
economically feasible.
Yeah.
Right? There you go. By the way, speaking of, what are some of the other products? Because it's not just this one camera. You've got a few things going on. What are some of the other products you're producing these days?
Well, so I started with that first camera on Kickstarter, and then I started making plastic grips for classic cameras. So I've got about 30 or 40 of those. My most popular ones are the Nikon FE, FM, FE2, FM2, etc. And the Pentax 6.7 grip I made for, I don't know if you follow Mike Padua on Instagram. He requested one, and I said, this is a crazy idea. I don't think that's great, but, it only has that wacky left-hand grip in wood. And, okay, I'll make you a right-hand grip one. And so I made it, and it's now my best-selling grip, which is weird. I gotta thank him for that suggestion.
Can I ask, do you kind of like look out at the marketplace and say, okay, this is stuff that that is not available and I can make and sell, or is it really it kind of just starts with something like this, something that came out of almost a chance encounter, or something that just interests you?
A little bit of all three of those things. So the first 4x5 I made, I was making for me, but at the time there were very few options. I think a couple of days before or after I launched my Kickstarter, also Standard Cameras launched theirs. And so now there's a whole bunch of options in that price range.
Right.
Generally, I work on a lot of projects either for work or for fun that will never see the light of day, just for economic reasons as sort of a consumer product. But once in a while, either somebody hands me, a project that they're working on and need some help with, and it inspires something else. Recently, I have a friend who is building it's something like a tray cam that makes 3D point clouds to map stream flow after floods out here. And he needed some help with some of the programming on that, and it inspired me to buy a bunch of Raspberry Pi Zeros and Pi Zero cameras, and maybe build like a digital Nimslo or Nishika 3D that I'm working on now. Maybe that'll see the light of day as a consumer product. But it sort of depends. A lot of the things I build just for me. I have a product request site or page.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And so, I get a lot of like wacky requests that I don't think anybody would buy, but once in a while somebody will request something that I know I can make in, a couple of hours, and I think will sell really well. The most recent, these film box tab holders, somebody requested, hey, can you make one of these? And I said, yeah, that's easy. And there's a lot of cameras out there that could use them. And so, within a day or two, I had prototyped a couple, and I threw them up on the website and sold a couple $100 worth of them on day one, which was really kind of crazy. I mean, I'm very small scale.
Do you have a lot of, is it through Instagram or your website that most people would find that so quickly?
Yeah. So I think most people are finding me on Instagram. I just broke 2,000 followers. I feel like Kim Kardashian over here. I think that's sort of the primary method of advertising, and then going on excellent podcasts.
I saw you were on another one recently too. I was checking that out. Yeah.
No, you've been around. You've been making rounds. You're doing the right thing. Hey, question for you. I'm talking about these little film tabs to the back. Do you, by any chance, make Darkslide holders for Hasselblad magazines?
Not yet. It is something that has been requested more than once. It's on the list. So I have a couple of cameras that I'd really like to build that I know will take, 6 to 10 months to get all of the kinks ironed out and bring it to market. And it's just such an expensive thing to sit down for 10 months and, prototype things without selling anything. I've been trying to pick the low-hanging fruit, the designs I can make in, under 2 weeks, let's say, and put those out on the market so that, I've got 12 printers running in the back right now, printing camera grips and some film tab holders to fill orders. And so I can use 2 to 4 printers to build prototypes while I'm filling orders. And so, let's see, I've built a bunch of different types of film holders. One was just from a request from a product that a friend of mine showed me. It was these old, I think Minolta made them in the 70s or 80s. They were like 2 film cans that clamped to your camera strap. And,
okay.
So I've been making those for, or a version of those for 35 millimeter and 120 films, and like single, double, and triple cases. I've made a meter. I have a little...
a light meter?
Yeah. It's a little shoe-mounted light meter. That just came out of... I did this project a while ago where I had a broken meter on my Yashica Electro 35 GSN.
Sure,
and so I made a extremely dry, like hour-and-a-half video on how to put manual shutter speeds into that camera. And then I also made a very dry 45-minute video on how to build a Arduino shutter tester for about $8. And then once I had done that, I had no meter on this camera, and I could desolder the metering cell, but like you can't get the same cell these days. And I had a bunch of, I have like a Canon P that I use all the time, and that has no meter. And so I made a little shoe-mounted light meter. It's mostly, analog to avoid FCC testing, which, again, could cost $3,000 to $10,000 before I could sell unit 1, and I just wanted to see. But if it's, I've sold out right now, I got to sit down and make another batch of them one day. And if that's relatively successful over this year, maybe I will run a Kickstarter to make a little digital meter that'll be smaller, cheaper, and better in every way. So,
when did you first do your first Kickstarter? Or basically, when did you start selling stuff?
I want to say last June.
About a year ago.
Okay, so this is becoming your full-time thing now, or not really? I mean, it sounds like it with all the stuff you're making.
Yeah, it's not my full-time thing, but because I do contract work, somebody might say, "Hey, I need this," and I will quote them and sit down for a week to many months and build them a piece of electronics or an electromechanical thing.
So you're still dealing with reality, is what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not all pastel cameras, right? Yeah. So regarding the view cameras, the colorful ones with the great bellows, have you noticed who buys them mostly? Is there kind of a demographic you can point to, or a location, or anything that would indicate who your customer base is, at least for those cameras?
Yeah, so it's discerning photographers who want excellent quality cameras at a great price.
Of course. Why did I even ask, right?
I think it's sort of a split between a lot of sort of new photographers looking for reasonably priced options.
Very reasonably priced. The prices are great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, and so the new sort of 4x5 hand camera has been doing really well. I think a lot of people have been using that for street photography and just walking around and getting these huge negatives out of them, using it in a way that a lot of that format hasn't been used before.
I'm assuming they're lighter. They're lighter than anything else comparable, right? Yeah, that's part of the draw.
Yeah. And the new ones are extremely durable. I've used a little bit of metal hardware, but not enough. So, I mean, it's way lighter than my Nikon F and not much bigger.
But yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I would say most people who are actually buying them are sort of new photographers looking to get into the medium for the first time, or looking for a really simple 4x5. Or I have a lot of camera collectors. You guys know and probably are those sort of old men who have 85 cameras around on display and use some of them. And
he's peeved at me. He knows my collection.
You definitely are not talking about me, but
I like to see them get used. But I think often people just buy cameras.
It's a collector's item too. Why not?
In the automotive trade, they call them trailer queens. These cars that are impeccable. Yeah. They just go from one show to the next. The tires never hit the ground. Yeah, they're trailer queens. Yeah.
But is it mostly in the States that you've made your sales, or have you found one particular country or folks in one country are calling and asking?
Yeah, so I ship all over the world. Primarily, I ship in the States just because shipping is so much cheaper. But I've sold a lot to England, a little bit to Germany and France and Japan and Taiwan.
I would guess that Japan would be a big market because the character of them is very. It just seems to go with Japanese culture. A lot of the pop things in fashion you see. I could see that camera being so popular amongst young people in Japan. Really can.
And they, not only that, but they've got a really excellent film culture there.
Yes, they do. Yes.
There's some excellent camera makers that I aspire to be one day. But so shipping to Japan is really expensive as well. There's a little bit of a language barrier. I mean, there's a lot of English speakers in Japan, but selling to the UK, everybody can read my website and sort of get the description, get the humor. It's a little tougher. I've been looking for an EU distributor that I'm working on, and maybe an Asian distributor. I sell a bunch to China as well.
But right now it's just you. I mean, in terms of handling all the shipping, the distribution, and
my 4,000 employees,
the minions.
They're all cool.
Anything coming on the horizon that we should know about?
So I've got a bunch of products that are in various states of prototyping. I'm working on a 6x12 back that'll fit in Graph-Lock cameras, like the Speed Graphic or pretty much any 4x5. And then a version of that'll fit the camera Dactyl. The OG is the new hand camera. Right now, that pretty much just shreds film, but I've made a little bit of progress. I got to get back to that. I'm working on a laser cut and 3D printed 8x10 field camera that's sort of like a more premium item that I think I will just make batches of 10 and sort of sell them as working, but art piece type things and crazy, wacky looks.
I could see that as being a very good market, a little niche market. You just think little short-run cameras that are quirky, interesting, however you want to describe it. But I could see that as an interesting direction to go, and a good direction to go.
Yeah, I think it's something that I would like to make one for myself, and I might as well sit down for a week or two and make 10 more and see how they do. I just released a do-it-yourself panoramic 35 millimeter pinhole kit that's also laser cut and 3D printed, sort of exploring the possibilities with the laser cutter. And then I've got on my desk right now, I've strayed away from building a lot of digital things because of FCC testing, and that I do everything in small runs. But I'm really into these like wigglegram cameras that people are making. I guess they used to print multi-lens camera images under a lenticular screen so you could free view 3D images.
Oh, yeah,
with sort of the decline of lenticular printers, people are scanning those images and turning them into animated GIFs. And so I'm working on a little digital camera project on my desk that will shoot with 4 lenses and make wigglegrams and maybe anaglyphs and some other things.
Ethan, thank you very, very much for joining us today. It's been fun talking with you. If our listeners want to see your cameras and what you're up to, what sites should they go to?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. My website is cameradactyl.com. That's CAMERADACTYL.com. And I'm also Cameradactyl on Instagram, and I have the account Buttergrip for sort of camera grips and accessories.
It's very cool. Wonderful, wonderful. Again, nice finally chatting with you. We've been going back and forth online for the longest time, so it's nice to actually talk and get to know each other a bit better. And again, if you're listening, go check it out. It's some great stuff. Ethan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And so the close of another show. Thanks to Sam Cornwell of Solarcan, Steve Lloyd of Chroma Cameras, Filippo Nishino of I'm Back, and Ethan Moses of Cameradactyl for joining us on our show today. If you want to learn more about these wonderful cameras, check out the links on our show notes on the B&H Photography Podcast homepage, or the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group, which you are welcome to join. If you are not a subscriber to our show, pull over to the side of the road right now and sign up on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, and Spotify, and tell them Al sent you. For now, on behalf of Jason, John, and myself, thank you so much for joining us today.